such a high song as our school song. But you got to drop that one down where it is reachable. But today, I get to preach on one of my favorite portions of Scripture, one of the favorite stories that's recorded, especially in the book of Acts, but really anywhere in the Bible. And as we begin this morning, I looked on the internet, and you can find everything there, and it's all true. But when you type in a scripture reference, you can get cartoons and pictures. Look at the one I found for today. Acts, the unexpected. Does that look at all familiar with any games that you've ever played? It's a get out of jail free card, Monopoly thing, but Acts chapter 12, verses 1 to 19. And that's what we're going to have today. So if you want to open in those Bibles in your pew to page 780, you'll be with us. Follow in your own Bible, hopefully, if you have that with you. Then Peter came to him, that's verse 11. I'll start with verse 1. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. He had James, the brother of John, put to death by the sword. When he saw that this met with approval among the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him out for public trial after Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was earnestly praying to God for him. The night before Herod was to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound by 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly, an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Quick, get up," he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. Then the angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals." And Peter did so. "Wrap your cloak around you and follow me," the angel told him. Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading to the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. When they had walked the length of 1 street, suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen." When this had dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant girl named Rhoda came to answer the door. When she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed that she ran back without opening it and exclaimed, "Peter is at the door." "You're out of your mind," they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said, "It must be his angel." But Peter kept on knocking. And when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet and described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. "Tell James and the others, brothers and sisters, about this," he said, and then he left for another place. In the morning there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had a thorough search made for him and did not find him, he cross-examined the guards and ordered that they be executed. Hello, my name is People Pleaser. Does that fit Herod or what? Does that fit me or what? Herod had in his crosshairs, political crosshairs, he had the leaders of the church. In fact, one of the 12 disciples was in those crosshairs. And he had him put to the sword. He killed and executed him. And then it says that when Herod found that that pleased the Jews, he grabbed Peter. And we need to be careful, folks. Whenever we start being people pleasers, it's a slippery slope. And it doesn't take long for horrible sin to take over, because people want us to do bad and evil things, especially in this society in which we live. But let's take a minute to look at King Herod. What did this guy do in this story? It was Passover, time frame wise, 1 year after Jesus' death and resurrection. Remember, it was on that Passover feast, the Seder, that Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper. That was Thursday night. Friday, he was executed and crucified. He was in the tomb for Passover and rose on Easter Sunday. And so that was 1 year prior. And you see what the church has done in just 1 year? I mean, it has just exploded. It's gone all over the then known world. The church in Jerusalem was growing, and these Jewish priests were getting, and leaders were getting really worried. But Herod was in this thing of arresting believers because it pleased the Jews. He was a Roman who was overseeing this part of the world, and the Romans did not want upheavals in the areas where they were ruling. And so when they thought, well, man, this is making them happy, let's just keep doing it. So they were arresting believers, and they planned to persecute them, and in many cases to kill them. They did kill the disciple James, and if you read about who that one is, remember the list of all of the disciples throughout the scriptures? James and John were the sons of Zebedee. That was their dad's name. And they had a nickname, Sons of Thunder. And so they were ones that just were boisterous and loud, and I can't help but think that's what got James in trouble, is that he was just proclaiming the news of Jesus and his resurrection and his power to people that didn't want to hear it. And it got him killed. And the poll numbers among Herod were rising. I hate opinion polls. Do you? I was looking for cartoons for opinion polls, and there was one pollster standing at the door with his notebook, and the guy at the door says, "I'm sorry, come back next week, maybe I'll have an opinion." But opinions, everybody's got them. When I was in college, I was very active in Campus Crusade for Christ. And you know how we began interacting with college kids? "Hi, I'm taking a survey. Do you mind if I ask you some questions?" What college kid is not going to say, "I don't want my opinion known out there"? That was such a hook every time. "Oh, you bet." And so you went down through all of these questions about how they were raised and what their religious background was and all this. And then the very last question was, if it was possible to know God in a personal way, would you be interested? Yes or no question. And 99+% said, "Well, yeah." "Okay, thanks. I'm done with the survey, but I couldn't help but see your answer to that last question. If you got another 5 minutes, I'd like to share that with you." And so it began to do that. So these opinion polls have tremendous power then and now. And so his opinion, or his reputation, was going up, and he was thinking it was great. But do you think that Herod was paranoid? I do, because you've got this preacher guy. You put him in jail. How much trouble can a preacher be? Don't answer that. But as they began to, he put him, what happened when Jesus, they thought they had him gone, when he killed him, and he came back alive. And these Christians, they put him in jail and they keep disappearing. And so they arrested Peter. That's because I want them to like me more. And then they planned the trial after the Passover, because we don't want to mess up the holidays. And so they planned it afterwards, so that wouldn't be too much of a deal. We're going to keep him in jail. And 16 soldiers were assigned to guard him. 4 groups of 4. And we find out later that 2 of them were actually chained to him. But in the meantime, there was a prayer meeting going on. And it says that the believers were earnestly praying to God for Peter. I cannot overemphasize the importance of united prayer. The church word we often use is corporate prayer. Each one of us need to pray to God individually for our concerns, for our family, for everyone else. But when we can get together as a group, there is encouragement there, there is power there, and these guys and ladies were gathering together to pray specifically for a need that they were aware of. Peter, their leader, was in prison, and they were praying for him. And another angel shows up. Now, remember already we've had angels throughout the book of Acts, and particularly one angel, and I think that explains Peter's not getting it at first. When Peter was on the roof in the house at Joppa, and he fell in a trance, and this sheet came down from heaven with all these different animals in it, and then went back up and came down, and he had this vision. And so another angel shows up and is there in the cell with him. Peter is sleeping. Obviously it's at night, it's dark, he's chained between these 2 soldiers. I mean, how can he even sleep like that? But he is, and maybe the soldiers were sleeping, I doubt it, but he was chained between them. And then an angel poked him in the side. And it says it struck him on the side. It's like, hey, get up. You know, it's time, we're going to leave. You know, and here he is, chained. Soldier, poked, get up. So he does, and the chains fall off. You know, that song, that verse that we sang of that song, the dungeon flamed with light. My chains fell off. This is where that came from. Is the chains fell off. The light is there. The angel has poked him in the side. He gets up. And this is straight from that song. My chains fell off. My heart was free. I rose, went forth, and followed thee. You know, because that's what happened. He didn't just lose his chains. That's just the beginning. But as we look at what happens, Peter's asking himself, is this really happening? What's going on here? And the angel says, get dressed. So it says Peter got dressed. Put on your shoes. He put on his sandals. Put on your sandals. And he did. Now, get your coat. You know, so he's telling him all these things. And he says, follow me. And the angel turns and takes off. This is God himself in the form of an angel. His messenger saying, follow me. And so Peter took off and followed him. Past the guards, because it said earlier that there were guards placed at the entrance. The chains fell off. What was the other end of the chain attached to? 2 guards. So they're standing there with empty shackles at the end of their chains. And they walk out, walk past the guards. They get to the first ever automatic door. This is where Walmart got the idea. As they walked up to the door swung open on its own. There wasn't an angel that opened it. There wasn't a guard that kicked it open. He didn't push it. It says they walked up to the door and it swings open all by itself. What would that be doing to your mind? I mean, it's like, wow, look at what's going on here. And then the angel led him for a block. He says the length of a street. So he says, follow me, and they keep walking farther and farther out of the prison. And then, poof, the angel is gone. And then Peter says, aha! That's one of the fun things. I said I was substitute teaching this last week a couple times, and I got to do math, and I mean, they actually let me teach. It was so fun. But there's nothing better, and those of you that are educators, and to see the light bulb go on and have one of those aha moments. And that's what happened to Peter right here. Dang, oh, now I know. God sent his angel. Well, Peter, yeah, the whole light was in there. He poked you in the side. He gave you instructions. So Peter says, God did send his angel. And so he got it. And the angel rescued me. The chains fell off. The door swung open. Walked right by all the guards. He rescued me. Can it get any better than this? And then, this is not a commercial to a cell phone company. But can you hear me now? Well, they don't even use that one much anymore. I guess it's kind of happened one resurrection in somebody's. But this is the part of the story where it gets hilarious. I mean, there's some real serious, sad stuff in here. But if we don't see the humor, folks, I'm funny, you're funny, we're human. That's the way that God made us. But Peter went to the prayer meeting. He knew where believers were meeting, and he knew that they were praying for him. Well, I got to get over there. So he headed over to the house of Mary. And it says the mother of John, also called Mark. And you might want to just throw that one back in your computer files of your brain somewhere, because John Mark is going to show up again in the book of Acts repeatedly. But it says Peter was knocking on the outer door. So he didn't even get all the way in. He's kind of out on the door into the courtyard, not the door to the house. It says the outer door. So he's way out there on the street, knocking on the door. And Rhoda comes. I can't wait to meet Rhoda. When I get to heaven, I'm going to say, are you blonde? Anyway, if Allison Schilt was here, that one is just for her. So if any of you see her, have her get online and watch this sermon. It's Allison, this one's for you. But Rhoda comes to the door. And she's, oh, Peter, God answered our prayers. And she turns around and beats feet back inside. She's so overjoyed, she just spins on her heel and takes off and goes back inside. Peter is outside. He's at the door. We've been praying for him. He got out. He's right there. And they said, woman, you are crazy. It says, crazy? You're a crazy lady. Well, the only explanation is it must be his angel. Oh, we Christians. When God slaps us in the face with an answer, we always have an excuse. We can try to reason it out. If it's a miracle, why can't we just say, wow, God just did a miracle? But instead, we have to try to decipher it and figure it out. And they said, it must be his angel. Now, the angel was definitely there. The angel's how he got out. There was an angel, but his angel disappeared. But Peter, the real guy, is standing out by the door. Meanwhile, meanwhile back at the ranch, or meanwhile back at the gate, at the outer gate, on the street, where there's people walking by, and having just escaped from jail, he's there making noise. And Peter keeps on knocking. What would be your thoughts if you were Peter? I know there was somebody there just a minute ago. Why aren't they letting me? Do you realize if they catch me, I'm dead meat? Knock, knock, knock. And the whole lesson of persistence, perhaps, comes up in that little part of the story. It says, then they opened the door and saw Peter. And these words amazed me. And they were astonished. Why? Reminds me of the story of this little country church that lived in an area that was suffering an extreme drought. And they decided the only way this is going to ever end is if we have a prayer meeting at the church and just storm the gates of heaven with the request for rain for our land. That's the only way that is ever going to happen. And so they came to the church, And everybody shows up, but this one little girl shows up with her umbrella. And they looked at her and he says, what's that for? It hasn't rained for months. And she looked at the pastor and says, yeah, but we're going to pray for rain now. How many times do we pray for something? Look out, yeah, I didn't figure it would kind of happen anyway. But they were astonished. What had they been praying for? Get Peter out of prison. And now all of a sudden the answer's right there in front of them and they're astonished. I think God shakes his head at us repeatedly when we pray and he answers and we can't accept it. Whoa, that surprises me. Well, he's our God. He's our Father. He loves us. Why should it surprise us that he hears and answers our prayers? These people were astonished that Peter was there. Peter, they're making such a ruckus that Peter says it made a motion for him to shut down or to be quiet. And I don't know if he did one of these, shh, or did one of these or whatever, but he's doing some kind of motion to get them to be quiet. And then he shared his story. I was sleeping. I had both arms in chains. The angel came, poked me in the side, woke me up, had me get dressed, put my coat on. We walked out and this amazing door swung open all by itself. And we walked for a block and then poof, the angel was gone. And I came straight here and Rhoda wouldn't let me in. And now I'm in. And so he tells them the whole story about how God answered their prayers and what happened. Now he says, go tell the others. You know, you guys have heard my story, but share it, would you? And when God answers our prayers, it isn't just for our good and our gratification. It ought to be for the good of all of our friends. When you have an answered prayer, you need to share it. Pastor Dale Erdely, Dr. Dale, he was my pastor in Missoula for years. He and his wife Vonda and their family had what they called a blessing bag. And it hung on a doorknob in their kitchen. And whenever God did something wonderful and it answered a prayer, they would write that down and drop it in the blessing bag. And then when tough times came, because they do, and they got a little discouraged, they would have all the kids and mom and dad sit around the table and they would dump that blessing bag out and they would read them. Just to remind them of the times that God answers prayer. And so we need to share that with other people. He says, tell the others now. And then he left for another place. Peter was no dummy. He says, I hang around here, I'm going to get in deep trouble. So he took off and went to another place. Doesn't even tell us where it was. The next day, it says there was no small commotion. Why do they say it that way? It was a big to-do. I mean, it was a blow-up. Like, okay, get Peter. This is the day of his trial. He's not where? And so you can imagine having 16 people guard him and then say, he's gone. It would have said, I gave you a full group of 16 Roman soldiers and now he's out of there? What's going on? And there was a big to-do, and they had a bolo, a manhunt go out for Peter. And they said that they searched everywhere trying to find him. And when they couldn't find him, he says, bring those guards in here to me. And he cross-examined the guards. And this is a question I have in my mind that there isn't anything necessarily spiritual about it, but he executed them. What did any of those guards do that was wrong? You know, they were said to guard somebody. How is a human going to stand against the angel and the power of God? Chains falling off, doors swinging open, walking right past. You know, these poor guys were executed because of that. And I think that probably the only thing I can come up with here is that there is a penalty to sin. And we live in a fallen world, and death is the penalty. Only God knows, and I can't pretend to be God. But to me, it's a sad part of the story that these soldiers were executed. But as I've tried to put this all together, what lessons can I learn? What lessons can you learn? And this is where I get really walking on thin ice, and I apologize for that, because I can't ever know what lessons you need or what lessons God is going to share with you through the Scripture. I wish I should have been very diligent over my years of ministry to record what people have said after a service. Because I said, wow, you really, thanks for sharing, because I really got this out of the sermon. It's like, I didn't even talk about that. But God used it. And so for me to say these are the lessons is a little arrogant, but humor me on this one. I think that as Christians, we have to understand that persecution is common. Right now, I am just about finished with The Insanity of God. And that book really makes me realize what Christians around the world have done and are doing to stay true to Him. And so persecution is common. We have been very spoiled, or maybe that's not the right word, but persecution is coming, and it's probably a really good thing. And then I want us to ask the question, what chains hold me? I don't know. I know in my life there are some things that are holding me down, that are holding me back from being the man God wants me to be. And I believe that properly understood, those chains can fall off. Not because I do anything right, not because anything else, but because people pray. Because God is powerful, because He answers. But I think it's important for us to identify what chains hold me back, hold me down right now. And then, do I follow God's instructions? We sometimes get poked in the side. He says, get up, get your coat, we're going to go somewhere. I need you to be here or there. You hear that? Feel that nudge? Do I follow God's instructions when I get nudged by Him? Also, God answers prayer. And many times to our own surprise, these guys that were praying earnestly for Peter were astonished when God answered. But God does answer our prayers, and we need to never quit. So do I pray confidently? Do I pray like, God, I'm asking you this, and I'm expecting you. I've got my umbrella here. We're going to expect you to do what we're asking you to do if it's your will. And do I pray confidently? And then am I surprised when God answers my prayer? I have to hang my head and say, whoa, I never figured that was going to happen. Way better than anything I could ever come up with, or even in my wildest dreams imagine. But there is power in the name of Jesus. Amen. To break every chain. We have a story of freedom this morning. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that we don't need to be bound by sin anymore. We realize and acknowledge that as long as we're in these human bodies, we deal with sin every day. And we will never be free of that until someday we stand in your presence. But I thank you that there is a promise that you can break the chains that hold us down, that you are greater than any power that's outside of us, that you've promised us that. We ask now that you would help us to make the applications that you want us to do. And we're going to thank you for your work in our lives.